And we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office. We're North Georgia's only live online morning show. It is this simple. Don't forget, folks, you can tell your friends, fyntv.com. That's it, fyntv.com. Click on there. We're 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday from 7 to 10. I am joined now by State Senator Josh Mckoon down from the Columbus, Georgia area. Again, we have State Senator Josh Mckoon with us. He is in a re-election bid himself. We're going to let him tell us about that. And then we're going to discuss the two Georgia State constitutional amendments that are on your ballot that you're looking at. Senator, are you with us?
I am.
It's been a long time. I haven't talked to you in a while.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on everywhere, and I've been listening, though, from time to time, and always enjoy your program. I think you have one of the most thought-provoking programs out there on Georgia state affairs, so I appreciate you having me on today.
Well, Senator, I say briefly, but would you like to share? You're in a re-election campaign down in Columbus. I know most of our viewers are in North Georgia, but just share what you're up against here with the home stretch of your campaign.
Sure. So the Democrats fielded an opponent against me. His name's Ben Anderson. His campaign's been relatively quiet, but we're taking nothing for granted. We are making phone calls and knocking on doors and doing the things you do in the last couple of weeks of a campaign, and just letting people know I'd like to be able to go back to the Gold Dome and represent them for another 2 years.
Senator, well, we appreciate that, and we are not shocked to find out the Democrats have put up a candidate against you. Anyhow, I have asked our viewers and many people in the state that have been all excited about early voting, to pause, not trying to stop them from voting, but to pause and not go vote if they don't understand the two very serious, now there's four, I think, constitutional amendments on the ballot, and they're all serious, and you can speak to all four, but two, for me, the most serious ones, I think everybody needs to try to understand before they go vote. Let's talk about number three. Let's start there if that's okay. And number three is the changing of the Judicial Qualifications Committee. Currently, let me just say this. Currently, my understanding is two judges of any court is the current selection is two judges of any court is selected, three lawyers who have served at least 10 years in the state bar, and two citizens, neither of whom shall be members of the state bar appointed by the governor. That is the way, and it's a 4-year term, and that is the way currently the Judicial Qualifications Commission is set up, appointed at this time. We have a constitutional amendment on the ballot to change that. What's wrong with the current system, and why is there an amendment to change it?
Well, just like with any agency, and I think you did a good job setting it up, there are issues that come up from time to time. There have been a couple of well-publicized cases where people feel like a judge that was being investigated was not treated appropriately. I understand that, and I agree we ought to look at some reforms. What people need to understand is that this constitutional amendment abolishes the current Judicial Qualifications Commission and takes it out of the Constitution. And the reason that's significant is what you're basically doing is you're saying, I'm going to trust a simple majority of the state legislature from here on out to decide what happens with judicial ethics in our state. The other thing that people need to know is that we're going to go from a commission that's appointed primarily by the Supreme Court and the state bar to a commission that will be primarily appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House. And there are a lot of conflict of interest issues. Just to give a quick example, if I had a judge in Columbus who had a complaint filed against him under this new system, I would fully expect that that judge would reach out to me and other members of the legislative delegation to try to get the lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House to intervene on behalf of that judge. I think it will politicize our judicial ethics process. And the last thing I'll say to you is that Georgia had an ethics report card several years ago where we received a D for our state ethics laws. The only reason we didn't receive an F is because we have an independent constitutional judicial ethics agency. So this amendment would get rid of the only bright spot in our state ethics and conflict of interest law. And so obviously I'm opposing it, and I'm urging people to vote no on Amendment 3.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Let me go the other direction here then. Amendment 3, folks, on your ballot starts out and it says reforms and reestablishes the Judicial Qualifications Commission and provides for its composition, governance, and powers. Okay. When you gave me the reasons, but I'm going to say what's wrong with this. What's wrong with the current? What led the House? And I'm pretty sure, and I don't want to misspeak and be unfair to anybody. It would be you or anybody, and I think you know that, Senator, when it comes to members of the state legislature. I don't want to be fair to any of them, but I kindly think this is a Speaker Ralston's amendment, is what I've been told. Is he highly supported this? The Speaker of the House. What do you feel led him to want to make these reforms? What did they see that's wrong? Because obviously it's not on the ballot. I won't say you can answer this, but I won't say you, but when I say you guys and ladies down there had to vote for it to get on the ballot. Now you may have voted no, I don't know what you did in your vote, and you can tell us that now. But it got on the ballot.
Yeah, so to answer your question and just break it down quickly, the reasons that were given, there was a case involving a DeKalb County judge, Judge Cynthia Becker, who is personal friends with Wendell Willard, who's chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and who was the author of the constitutional amendment. Judge Becker was investigated by the JQC, was also at the same time being investigated by the district attorney's office. She was indicted for statements made that were recorded during an interview with the JQC. She claims she didn't know she was being recorded, and she was unclear on why she was being called in the first place, basically alleging that she didn't receive appropriate due process. And that's what Chairman Willard talked about over and over again from a public policy standpoint. We need to fix this. Well, the problem is the legislation we passed after midnight on the 40th day of the session that'll replace the current Judicial Qualifications Commission, if Amendment 3 passes, doesn't provide for any more due process guarantees for judges, doesn't provide for any more transparency. So I acknowledge and agree with Chairman Willard that there are issues that we should address, but the way we should address them is by having a study committee process, bringing all the stakeholders together, letting everybody have their say, and then deliberately proceed instead of simply saying we're going to abolish the independent constitutional JQC and replace it with one that's dominated by legislative appointees.
Okay, now let me say that. Now let me back that up. All right, first of all, can we establish, you and I together, that, and I don't want to take, is it Lester Tate? I don't want to take anybody to task on the JQC or former head of the JQC. I don't want to take people individually to task this morning, investigators or anything, but are you and I going to be in agreement that we have, I'm going to say serious, we've got some serious problems with the current JQC structure and some things going on there? Are you going to, I'm using the word serious, but what do you say currently with the JQC?
Well, currently things are amiss because of the constitutional amendment. So when the constitutional amendment passed, you had Lester Tate resign, which if people think that Lester Tate was the problem, he's no longer on the commission. And then you also had Mark Daylor, who was the executive director, resign and leave the commission. So because of all the uncertainty swirling around the constitutional amendment, it would surprise me if the JQC is really functioning right now. I think that it won't get back to normal until after this referendum is over with. But clearly, there were concerns about, I heard Lester Tate's name invoked at hearings, and people saying they have personal problems with him. And again, there's a process that we go through to deal with, individual problems with an agency. And my point to you and to your viewers would be, this is sort of killing a gnat with a sledgehammer. Instead of us saying, let's make some tweaks and try to fix what's wrong with the existing system, we're saying we're going to throw it out and replace it with one that's dominated by legislative appointees. And there are only 5 other states in the country that do that. And I think there's a reason for that, because it's really not an independent commission when you go in that direction.
All right, well, let me ask you just directly, because I'm going to say I have not myself dealt with, but I have dealt with JQC going back for multiple years. I have read JQC investigations going back on a Superior Court judge in a district 10 years ago. I interviewed that former judge 6 years ago. I interviewed that judge 6 years ago. I heard their accusations. I read the whole JQC. I heard their accusations, what charges they were going to bring up. I heard the judge say it was personal and a vendetta. And I have heard these accounts, and I'm using this particular one. And for me, when you say, I think the current JQC could have a lot of personal animus towards, that could be happening more than it should, is just my thought, because I have looked at those. I mean, if you go in this morning, let me ask you for my viewers, if you go in and you are an attorney, correct, and you practice law in the courtroom, am I correct?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Okay, I just wanted to double check, because you do put on Facebook, I've been doing a lot of lawyering today.
I did a lot yesterday.
Because I didn't want you to put on Facebook how much lawyering you've been doing if you're not really a lawyer. But anyhow, we're talking with Senator Josh Mckoon. But anyhow, if not that you would, and I'm just not taking you down the road, but if you were to come out of there and for some reason you did not get the verdict you wanted from a judge, and you felt something was wrong or inappropriate, you could immediately go file. There's no really qualification to having to file. You could file a JQC this afternoon against the judge that heard your case, correct?
Right. And not only that, there's not even a requirement that the complaints be put in writing.
Exactly.
But what I want you and your viewers to understand is that doesn't change if we pass the constitutional amendment.
I understand that.
None of these process reforms are being addressed, and that's really why I'm opposed to it. What I would like us to do is to vote the amendment down and then bring everybody together. Chairman Willard, this is the first time I've ever seen this, where there's a study committee that starts meeting after we pass legislation. And they've been meeting this fall, and there have been people who have had complaints against judges who feel like it's a star chamber deal. They file a complaint, it goes into a black hole. They never hear anything else about it. They want some transparency. Judges want guarantees of due process. We ought to address all of that, but we ought to do it in a responsible way. And the responsible way to do it is for us to take about a year, bring everybody to the table, get all these issues out there, and then come back to the public with a more comprehensive constitutional amendment that allows for these process changes. That's my view.
Okay. I want to move along, but I want to say I for one have seen the now the JQC has done, and I wanted to have our conversation and not take, and that's why I said not take individuals at the JQC to task by name or their job performance, because I know several of the names you brought up. So just saying that, I want to wrap this up, that the JQC has played an important role removing some judges from the bench that needed to be. And that needs to be said. It has there has been some effectiveness of the JQC. You can read that yourself on a list of judges that needed to go. So we'll say that. The other thing is, I think the JQC needs reform. Those are my words directly. We're just think it doesn't need to be reformed through this constitutional amendment on this ballot. Are we correct? Is that what we're saying?
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Okay, so you're saying vote no on this, bring it to the table, bring all the players, and let's have the discussion and get something that really works for the citizens of Georgia. This is not it.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly my position.
Okay, well, I got your position exactly, and I have that on record, okay? That's on the record, okay? Okay, now let's go to, I don't want to make light of the sexual exploitations. Could you authorize penalties? And I want to give our viewers a chance on all of the amendments real quick, and we'll close out with the school choice or the fix the school amendment. But authorize penalties for sexual exploitation and assessments on adult entertainment to fund child victims services. Now, Phil Kent has waited for God knows how long this past Sunday morning to say on the Georgia gang that this was a poll tax. So he said it. I'm going to use his name, Phil Kent, on the Georgia gang. He's been waiting a long time to call this a poll tax. So explain number 2 to us, if you could, Senator.
Sure. So Georgia has been a real destination for what is commonly referred to as human trafficking. What we're really talking about are young women and men who are, taken against their will and forced into sex slavery. There's no polite way to say it. Over the last several years, the state legislature has passed laws to give prosecutors the tools they need to bust up these human trafficking crime rings, and they've done a pretty good job of going after it. The problem that Amendment 2 is trying to address is when you have these young women or young men who've been engaged in this for, sometimes years, when they finally break it up and rescue these young people from this circumstance, they've gone through a terribly traumatic ordeal. They have a lot of mental health problems. And so what Amendment 2 does, it does two things. It imposes a tax on the adult entertainment industry, primarily strip clubs, and it dedicates the money from that tax for the state to pay for certain mental health services to help these people get rehabilitated after they are rescued from these circumstances. So a yes vote on Amendment 2 imposes a tax on the adult entertainment industry. It's estimated that tax will yield about $2 million in the first year, and that money will then be allocated to these mental health services for victims of human trafficking.
Okay, let's go to number 4. Dedicates revenue for existing taxes on fireworks to trauma care, fire services, and public safety. Is that as cut and dry as it sounds to me?
Yeah, sometimes these amendments, they kind of hide the ball with the language, but
right.
This is pretty straightforward. So, the legislature recently legalized the sale of certain fireworks in Georgia. When we did that, we also authorized an excise tax to be charged on those fireworks. Well, right now, that tax goes into the general fund for the legislature to spend on whatever it wants to spend it on. Amendment 4, if it passes, will lockbox those funds and dedicate them to the trauma services and fire services. So that's what Amendment 4 would do.
Okay, let's round this out with the hottest topic in the media. Has Governor Nathan Deal doing commercials. I for one have a conflict here because this is interesting. This is when the media says this is bringing liberals, Democrats, Republicans together. I'm just wondering what is here that I'm missing if that's bringing everybody together, if that's what can do it. Provides greater flexibility and we've all heard the criticism to the language and the words in the amendment on the ballot, provides greater flexibility and state accountability to fix failing schools through increasing community involvement. Let me just say this is probably bothers me more than anything. It is one of the largest constitutional amendments in the state of Georgia that I can recently remember, that the biggest change to your constitution with a transfer of government powers, you may agree or disagree, to be decided with one sentence, folks, one sentence. Shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended to allow the state to intervene in chronically failing public schools in order to improve student performance? That's one sentence. What say you, Senator? You got the floor.
So I supported this amendment in the Senate. I voted for it. I have been, at community meetings during the fall, and I've been trying my best to make the case for it. I think the first thing that people need to be aware of, and I have good friends who are violently opposed to Amendment 1, and I respect their opinion. I think for me, the big issue is people are saying this takes away local control. Well, as somebody who, as a county party chairman and just somebody interested in my community, and I spent a lot of time watching how our Board of Education functions, I would submit to you that there is a very, very low degree of local control in our existing system.
I didn't know any was left.
Yeah, I mean, frankly,
I'm sorry.
I go to a school board meeting, and the unelected superintendent tells the board what they're going to do, and 99% of the time they rubber stamp what they're told. When you add in these federal programs where they offer about 10% of the money that is spent, but exercise about 100% of the control, I think that local control of our schools is largely a myth.
Hey, let me just, I don't want to interrupt your answer there, but let me just break from that for a minute, because you did go down a trail I want to follow. The interesting thing to me is I tell people when they come on board at FetcherNews.com, and if they're going to cover Board of Education, they have to take a class in state and federal acronyms. Because no, that's not. I know you're laughing, but you're laughing because it's right.
That's exactly, yes.
If you went over to your Board of Education meeting tonight, and you haven't gone in 3 or 4 years, and we won't hold that against you, and you sit in the room, if you truly could come out at the end of that Board of Education meeting and tell me what happened, I want to meet you today. So go for that. No disrespect to our local boards, and I think you can understand. I'm not taking a personal shot. It is just the local control. Go back. You voted for this. You've been trying to explain it. I'm sorry for the interruption, but take back over there, Senator.
Sure. So basically, what the amendment would do if it passes, it would create an opportunity school district, which would be run by a school superintendent appointed by the governor. The only schools that would be eligible to be placed in the opportunity school district are schools that are deemed chronically failing. That means that they've scored below 60 on the CCPRI for 3 years in a row. They could only take 20 schools per year for a maximum of 100 schools. And a school that's in the opportunity school district cannot remain in the opportunity school district for more than 10 years, at which time it's returned to the control of the local system. I think for people that live in communities where you have excellent schools, this is a little bit difficult to wrap your brain around. Here in Muskogee County, where I live, we have 8 schools that fall into that category. Almost all of them are elementary schools. So that means that children in our community who are already, these schools are in poorer parts of our community, they're already having a problem getting a good start, and they're being put further and further behind because they're not reading at grade level when they reach the 3rd grade. And the Muskogee County School District has had years and years and years to do something about the performance of these schools. So my feeling about it is, if we can offer another tool in the toolbox and give these children and their families an opportunity for somebody to come in with a fresh set of eyes and try to put some emphasis on student performance, to me, saying no to that is like your house burning down and turning away a fire engine. I just don't. I don't believe that we shouldn't give this a try, because the schools that are going to be affected are schools that are absolutely not working for the students, and that's not a shot at our teachers, who I think are working very hard, but it is a shot, frankly, at some of the administrative decisions that get made. A lot of people are being hired and paid very large salaries who never enter a classroom, who aren't involved in the education of a child, and frankly, I think getting somebody involved who just has a laser-like focus on student achievement makes an awful lot of sense. I'd like to see it happen here in Muskogee County.
Okay, well, let me take a couple things you said there and break those down if you can answer those. First of all, there's several of us out here that are wondering what is the last thing that the government, including the state, took over that we champion as a success. So that's just a gut feeling. So I guess that's one thing that concerns a lot of people, really. Let me ask you a question then. Why do you feel that there's been as many, and I will say even Board of Education, and I know how it works, the superintendent of school wants to come out and say they oppose this, but they really can't make a public statement on behalf of the school system without the board approval. So the board, it comes up as a resolution that they can make a statement, and then after that they do. I'm going to tell you, what is there, 40 now, 40 Board of Education, 40 superintendents, school systems that have come out opposed. And I'm going to say if there's 40, I'm going to say you can double that as far as superintendent of schools, but their school board just has not passed the resolution. So why do you think they are so opposed to it and they haven't looked into it and see it as thoroughly as you do?
I think that, the education establishment does not want scrutiny on these failing schools. This is not, I think it's important for people to know, this is not a unique to Georgia proposal. Governor Deal studied very carefully what was called in Louisiana the Recovery School District Program. And Governor Jindal got that passed. They took over a tremendous number of schools in the New Orleans area, took them away from the administration of the local Board of Education, and student achievement improved. The achievement gap between white students and minority students narrowed. Almost every metric that you would measure this on, there were positive results. So, I think that the reason you have superintendents opposing it, and to be frank, most of the boards who are passing these resolutions are doing so because the superintendent is instructing them to do so. I think that they do not want, somebody second guessing or kind of looking over their shoulder. But again, for me, if you look at what's happened already, just with the potential of this amendment passing, and Atlanta Public Schools and the DeKalb Board of Education already making moves to try to put more focus on the schools that are on the list, that's a real benefit to this that I think a lot of people aren't considering. It's not just about the schools that actually go into the Opportunity School District. It's about the fact that now local districts are going to say, we don't want our schools to be taken over, so we're going to do what we need to do to make those schools successful. And so I think the opposition that you're seeing is reflexive. It's from the education establishment. The NEA, the National Teachers Unions, put $2 million into an ad campaign to defeat this amendment. And frankly, I'm all for teachers, but I rarely find myself on the same side as the National Education Association.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir, but I will have to tell you that is where I'm struggling is I told somebody the other day, okay, there's a side of me that says taking over schools, and that's how it sounds, and so on and so forth, and the government having control and more control. Am I really falling down on the side of a teachers union? So that's where I'm actually confused here and don't understand how this is bringing everybody together. Two last things, if we can wrap this up, but I would like to cover two last things. One, well, actually three things will be quick, but one, on the teachers, why do you, the concern of the governor's office, because let's be clear on this, and tell me where I'm wrong, Senator, just tell me straight if I'm getting this wrong. But actually, if this was to pass, by the time it gets put in place, Governor Deal is really not going to be the administrator of this. It'll probably be set up, everything done, and administrated by the next governor, or for the most part. So Governor Deal's actually opportunity himself, no pun intended, to just take over schools, that fear out there that he's just going to run and take over 100 schools, he's really not going to have the tools to do that immediately without everything in place after this passes, if it does. But what about the concern that, you know, there's a lot in the state right now that say, hey, we would like to have a state elected school board, not you know, an appointed school board and a state elected superintendent. Richard Wood's a great guy, met him on the campaign trail. I really like this guy, but there's many have said, well, you know, his ability to do things and move things in education in Georgia are limited based on. So people are not ready to hand more appointable power to a governor in the state of Georgia. What say you?
Well, I'll tell you this. You know, I almost feel like my name needs to legally be changed to Josh Mckoon, constant thorn in the side of Governor Deal. But on this issue, you know, I mean, I've spent time talking to the governor's staff. I think that Governor Deal has a very genuine concern for the children of this state and the children who are being left behind by schools that are failing them. And I think that you're right. He knows, you know, he's going to be moving in the last 2 years of his second term, but the legacy that he will leave is putting a very valuable tool in place to help turn these schools around and to give these kids another chance. And I believe him when he says that. I think that he has a real passion for this, and he and I are in complete agreement that putting another tool in the toolbox is a good idea. I completely understand, and I've had a lot of conversations with my conservative friends, you know, that some people say, I don't like empowering the governor. I don't like the idea of some new entity that's going to be taking from local districts. I get that. But I think when you look where we are from an education standpoint, and you talk about, I mean, you got to think about this, where Georgia is nationally in K-12 education, and then you've got schools that are way below average in Georgia. I mean, these students are really, really being given a tough time. And if we don't step in and provide some mechanism to improve the performance of these schools, ultimately what we are doing is we are condemning these children either to a life of just, you know, abject poverty, inability to compete in the marketplace job-wise, or having people turn to criminal activity. So, you know, to me, this makes a lot of sense, and I think that the governor got this right. And, you know, I'm going to be voting yes. I'm encouraging people to vote yes. And I understand your struggle with it. I understand other people having a tough time with it. But for me, when I look at the status quo at these schools that are failing, I really don't believe that this is going to make things worse, and I think there's a very good chance it's going to make things better.
Well, Senator, I must agree with you when you jokingly say change your name to thorn in the side. I have talked to you through the legislative process and trying to vote on some things down there in Atlanta, and myself, I don't hesitate 1 minute to take Governor Deal to task. That's what we do and we should do. So I agree with you. It's not that you would not take this to task if you felt it was wrong for the citizens of Georgia and your district. So I have to say, I understand that coming from you, knowing you. So you've helped me out. I have two quick things on this. Number one, the school, yesterday, he did not say this, but there's been some talk about the raises teachers were supposed to get. And I do think this is the Atlanta media trying to stir things up. Myself, I'm not going to take Governor Deal, but they're kindly trying to put out here a fear in the next 2 weeks that Governor Deal's basically going to lash out against or come back and highlight these school systems that did not take the money that were supposed to go for raises for teachers and so forth, trying to drive a wedge between Governor Deal and at least the 40 that have come out and publicly said they're against this. What's your take on all of that right now?
So I think that the governor is right to bring up this issue. It was extremely frustrating for me to vote for the budget and basically trusted local control. We're going to allocate this money. The governor made it clear it was for teacher pay increases. And then for me to come home and this summer watch the Mckoon County Board of Education fritter that money away and not provide the 3% teacher raise. So I certainly am one that will be arguing next year if we're going to provide funding to raise teacher salaries, to do it in a mandatory way as opposed to just sort of granting the money out because, I wound up getting into an argument with the school system down here about what that money was supposed to be used for. And so I think the governor shares that frustration that here we were trying to help teachers who clearly are underpaid and do a very oftentimes thankless job. And so, yeah, I agree with your assessment. I think that the media is trying to spin that in a way to make it seem sort of dark in some respect. But I think all you're really going to see next year is, I think, if we're in a position, the governor feels like the state's in a position to offer some funding for teacher raises, that we're gonna do that through the budget process in a way that will not allow what happened this year to recur.
Senator, one amendment that is not on the ballot that many were hoping for, and I know we're going to have a lot of time when we get into session next year, and I know you always join us and help us through what is on the session and what's going on down in Atlanta. So we won't go into that, but one amendment that's not on the ballot that many in Georgia hoped would make the ballot is a constitutional amendment. Now, English being the official language is different, and people get that confused, don't they? That because Georgia English is the official language, but it's not a constitutional amendment, and I know a lot of people wanted that. Do you see that effort coming back in this next session?
I'm absolutely bringing the amendment back, and you're correct. We have a statute about English as the official language, but we have the driver's license exam administered in 10 different foreign languages. We've got these calls in Gwinnett County and Hall County and other places to start printing our ballots in multiple languages. We've got the Secretary of State putting out videos in 5 different languages on how to register to vote and how to vote. I mean, I don't know why people want to continue to divide us up. But one of the things that ought to be a great uniter of all 10 million Georgians is a confluence of people being able to communicate in a single language. Doesn't mean you can't speak another language. A lot of times people call this English only. That's not what it is. I'm happy to celebrate the diverse population of our state, but when the state government communicates with its citizens, it should do so in English. And that's what we're after, and we will be bringing that back next year.
It is, and the argument, folks out there, is you'll hear, well, English is already the official language. Don't get fooled by that, and we won't go there. Senator, we've got to run, but I think on November 9th we're going to be celebrating the election of a Republican president. I really do. I feel strongly we're going to do that. I've not asked you to get into that conversation this morning, but I feel we're going to get up November 9th and celebrate the election of a Republican president.
Well, I'm right there with you. I feel like in the conversations I'm having with my friends around the country, there are a lot. We talk about the silent majority a lot, and I think that you're seeing these, record-breaking voter turnout all over the country, and I think people are going to be surprised by the number of registered Democrats who lost their jobs because of bad trade agreements negotiated by Bill Clinton, who are going to say, I want to vote for the candidate who's talking about bringing jobs back to my community, getting our economy moving again, and getting this huge albatross of Obamacare off our necks. And so I feel optimistic, and we've just got to do all we can between now and November 8th to elect Donald Trump and all the way down the Republican ticket.
Okay, well, Senator, listen, on November 9th or 10th, somewhere in that area, we're going to orchestrate, we're going to do a montage of as many people as we can that will record so we can play it for everybody. And the recording is going to be BKP was right from day one. So if you, we want to know if we win, as though I hope we will and think we will, we want you to get on that list, because I know it sounds a little arrogant, Senator, but when Donald Trump wins, I was right from day one. So.
Well, I'll be happy to celebrate with you.
Senator, you have a nice day. You keep up lawyering, and I want to thank you, and so does our audience, for your help on the Georgia State Constitutional Amendments. They've been a great help, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon. And we wish you well in your election bid, and we'll be talking to you down there at the Gold Dome, keeping up with legislation this fall.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's Senator from Muskogee County down there in Columbus, State Senator Josh Mckoon. Senator Mckoon was very helpful to me, and I hope to you also. We went through every state, and we did all sides to try to cover all sides and get a clear view of every state constitutional amendment. I'm going to take a brief break. We're going to come back and wrap up the show. I'm your host, BKP. You want to come back and hear my ending, because I'm interested on why liberals are excited about taking Mosul, a war. Come back with me, BKP.